Hi everyone, welcome. You might be thinking to yourself, wow, what have these worms done to deserve such a delicious feast? Well, not much. This is just your everyday run-of-the-mill worm bin. It's actually a pretty young bin. It's 72 days of age, fed 6 times so far. And in a lot of cases recently, I've been launching systems in such a way that I'll bring a system to completion, and then whatever worms come out of it, I'll sort of split that population and launch 2 bins. But in the case of this bin right here, we basically took all the worms out of one single system to launch off this one system, and it's a pretty good size population based on our estimates. I don't have the numbers here right in front of me, but I believe that the estimated worm count in here is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 2,600 worms, something like that. Pretty good size worm count. So these top covering newspaper bits, they're pretty far gone. I think we're going to do the same thing as we did last time, which is just collect up whatever bits we can and drop them down into the feeding zone. This feeding zone indicator, however, seems like it's holding up good enough to give one more use out of it. I mean, I do have a few coffee filters upstairs in the kitchen, but I did not bring them down with me. So we'll just reuse what's here already. Now, it's been 14 days since we last checked in on this system. And from what I remember, the feeding was stuff that I anticipated would go pretty quick, and it was stuff that I thought they would like. So whether we're going to bump into any leftovers at this point, taking those two things into consideration, those few things into consideration, not only the fact that a good amount of time has passed and it was stuff that I believe that the worms like, but the other consideration is the fact that this is thought to be a pretty heavily populated system. So we might not really see many leftovers, but let's excavate the feeding zone and see what they've done as far as leaving leftovers. And I got a feeling if we were to come back another 14 days after giving them the feeding that they're going to get today, all that melon, I think that would be almost guaranteed that we would find no leftovers. So this might actually be leftovers, because I believe that one of the things that they got was potato peel, and the worms will work off all the yummy starchy goodness off the potato peel, and a lot of times they'll have to come back later once the actual skin of the potato is broken down to the point where they can nibble that away too. So that's pretty much what I'm thinking we're seeing there. So leftovers, yeah, we are actually encountering some leftovers, surprisingly. And I think I see a lot of springtails. I don't know, springtails is something that has been kind of a thorn in my side in one of my systems. One of my systems, it just seems like the springtail population sort of exploded. And here and there I'll see springtails in other systems too. I believe that this was the one other system where I believe I saw a pretty good number of springtails. Certainly not as bad as I saw in my mixed batch of worms. And I've been seeing it that way for quite some time now, so it's just a never-ending story with the springtail saga over in that bin. And we'll see what becomes of it. My only hope is that it doesn't become sort of a plague that starts catching from one system to the next. A lot of people question why I'm so averse to the whole concept of springtails being in my systems, and when they're in numbers like we see here, the quantity that you see in this system, perhaps a little more than I'm accustomed to seeing, but nothing that I would really try to take any measures against or try to counteract. I would just say that, yeah, we got a good number of springtails in here, but they don't seem to be kind of in that out of control population size. And hopefully they stay that way. So now I'm starting to see why I named the video the way I did last time. Last time I referred to this as my almost at capacity red wiggler bin. And it definitely is close to being full. This is kind of from that era, short-lived era, when I was thinking I would try to really build up new bins very close to being at their capacity, full of bedding when I launch the worm population into it. But I guess the drawback to doing that is that I've kind of robbed myself of the space that I need to get stuff done. Because I do like to stack stuff up to try to open up a pretty good sized feeding area when I'm maintaining my bins, and as you can see, I'm already up near the edge. And I always worry at times like this that I'm going to knock some off the bench down onto the floor, make a big mess. So I think we're done excavated. I don't think we need to dig any deeper here. We're going to start into the replenishment of the feeding zone. So I've got a replacement top covering newspaper, so we are going to reuse what's already in here as far as newspaper as their bedding for today's feeding, and I don't think we're going to go even much more than this. In a system that's this heavily populated, it does seem like we're converting a lot of the material in the bin to castings very rapidly. So this might be one of those systems that doesn't really make it into the, many hundreds of days of age range. This system might actually get to that point where, it hits its capacity and needs to be harvested for the castings that have piled up, and then get the worms working on a fresh batch. And maybe then I'll be sold on the idea that what I did here was a good idea, but at the moment I'm sort of veering away from doing it that way in all my other new bins. Not going quite as big on piling this stuff in the beginning, and starting the systems with a little bit, less material than what we did here. So I've got a feeling that these worms are going to definitely enjoy this. Nice assortment of melon, all kinds of delicious cantaloupe melon and watermelon. So I think they're going to enjoy it. And I also kind of wondered if maybe we'd be better off not going back on with the plastic coverings in the case of this system here, with all this moisture coming in with all this melon. I did actually think about swapping out the bubble wrap covering that we've got, that we took off of here earlier, and putting in its place just a piece of cardboard, perhaps over a sheet of newspaper. I don't know. We're going to cover up what we've just given them as they're feeding here today, and perhaps after we've had a chance to see how the rest of the system's holding out as far as moisture content goes, we'll make that decision. Because maybe we can press on a little bit longer with the plastic coverings, but I'm worried about what I saw happen in a few of my systems recently, which was that they kind of went from being, what seemed to be a little bit too damp to suddenly way too wet, I would almost prefer to see the top surface of the bin get a little bit dry and maybe see a little bit less worm traffic than the rest of the material in the system. If I knew that by doing it that way, I was pretty much guaranteed not to see the material in the bin get all wet and nasty. That might be the way to play it here. Although I do feel like the material is nice and loose and crumbly and pretty much the way I like it. So I'm sure that if we were to just go back on with the plastic covering, we wouldn't be, causing any sort of problems. But then again, I've missed the opportunity to prevent it in the past. So maybe I just need to be a little bit more, a little bit more cautious. Perhaps a little bit less optimistic. And perhaps use this as the opportunity to switch from plastic coverings to a more porous paper-based assortment of coverings. Oops, that's a avocado pit. I was bumping into avocado skin in a few places, and we just bumped into the pit, which we were pretty easily able to crush. A lot of times you see me preserving the foods that I put into my bins and not breaking them up into little pieces and just allowing for the breakdown process to happen organically rather than me trying to break stuff up into small pieces and help it get to that broken down stage. But something about the avocado pits, I always feel like I want to test them to see if they're at that point yet where they'll crumble in my hands. Okay. It seems like I excavated the middle and then I excavated the two edges, and then somewhere in between those three regions there's a section that just doesn't get really very much attention at all. So I just dug into it and I found some kind of dense pressed together material. But it's certainly not bad. Very nice material in here. I like the way it all flows, I like how it's all crumbly, I like how none of it sticks together and turns into a big muddy mess. I wish all my bins were like this. This is very nice. But I think we're at that point where we can start getting things back to being covered up, but I think we are gonna return the I don't know, I'm still so torn on going one way or the other, because I do have the plastic obviously that we just removed, but I've also got a piece of cardboard that I thought I might place on top in the place of it. I mean, all that top covering newspaper, I've already fashioned a nice piece of replacement newspaper, one that would actually go quite thoroughly around, all the way around, kind of blocking out airflow. And then it almost seemed to me like if we were to just put cardboard on top of this, we might even, you know, see a minimum amount of moisture loss due to evaporation by doing it this way. So, you know, why don't we do that? I'm going to leave off the plastic covering. I'm going to go back on with this piece of cardboard. But before we make it official, I just want to really quickly take a look on the plastic covering, because sometimes you'll find a worm in this stuff kind of playing around in between the bubbles, and I would hate to leave them stranded out here. As things dry out, it would become inhospitable and pretty much deadly for a worm, but it does seem to me like we've not found any. So once this stuff does dry out, I'll be able to crumble it all off and drop it back down into the container, and for that reason maybe I'll just leave this out here on the bench so that when I do get around to doing that a little bit later after it has dried, it'll be right here. So I'm not going to haul this back onto the shelf, we'll just leave it here. All I've got to do is put a few things away and get stuff cleaned up, but I'm not going to keep you around for that, that's boring. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go, that's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.